The smoke rose in columns, so thick they blotted out the sun over the Tiber from the Janiculum Hill. Marcus Fabricius watched his world burn, not with the distant detachment of a general, surveying enemy territory, but with the helpless paralysis of a man, watching his children die and being unable to reach. Them the Senones had poured through the Colline Gate 3 hours ago. 3 hours. That was all it had taken to undo 7 centuries of kings, consuls, and conquests. The Gauls moved through the streets like a plague, their long swords drinking Roman blood, their torches turning temples and insulae alike into funeral pyres. His wife was in those streets. His daughter Marcus turned from the hill and walked back toward the cluster of survivors, huddled among the rock senators too old to flee. A handful of soldiers who had fought their way out, women clutching children who no longer cried because they had no tears left. They looked to him. He was no general, just a military tribune who had happened to be stationed at the Tiber ford when the rout began. But rank meant nothing now. What mattered was that he had brought them here, to this high place. While Rome burned below water, someone croaked. Marcus unslung his canteen and handed it over without a word. A woman took it, her hands shaking so badly she spilled half of it before it reached her lips. Tribune, an older soldier named Varro, grabbed his arm, pulled him aside. We can't stay here at dawn. They'll come for the hills. I know. We have perhaps 200 able bodies, half that many swords. Marcus looked past Varro, toward the city, toward his home, toward his family. They butchered the priests at the temple of Vesta, Varro continued, his voice cracking. Threw the sacred fire into the street like garbage. I saw it. The Gauls don't care about gods. Tribune, they don't care about treaties. They don't care about... Stop. Varro fell silent. Marcus stared at the flames below, at the pillars of smoke that rose like the ghosts of the dead somewhere in that inferno. His wife was either dead or wishing she was his daughter 7 years old, with her mother's dark eyes, and his stubborn chin, was either dead or wishing she was. He should feel something: grief, rage, despair. Instead, he felt nothing but a cold, hollow clarity. Rome is not its buildings, he said quietly. Rome is not its temples or its walls. Varro frowned. Tribune, Rome is the men who remember what it stands for. Marcus turned to face the survivors, to face the 200 souls who had followed him up this hill. And as long as we breathe, Rome breathes. Below, the city that had ruled half of Italy screamed in its death throes. But on the hill, a man who had lost everything made a choice that would echo across millennia. He chose to fight. The night did not bring silence, it brought screams, carried on the wind like the cries of wounded animals. The Gauls were still hunting, still killing, still dragging whatever they found from the rubble-terrified Romans who had hidden in cellars or attics, praying the barbarians would pass them by. They never passed anyone by. Marcus moved among his people, counting swords, counting spears, counting anything that could be used as a weapon. A baker had a long knife for scoring bread. A carpenter carried his hammer. An old man, bald and stooped, clutched the blade of a broken gladius wrapped in leather. How many? Marcus asked Varro. 213, maybe 40 who can hold a line. The rest. Varro glanced at the civilians. The rest will be meat if it comes to a fight. It will come to a fight. Varro said nothing he didn't need to. A woman approached them, the same one who had taken the water earlier. Her face was smeared with soot, her stola torn, but her eyes had stopped shaking. Now they were flat. Determined. Tribune, lady, my name is Livia. I was watching from the hill when the gate fell. I saw where the Gauls entered. I saw which streets they took first. She paused. I saw where they didn't go. Marcus studied her. She was young, perhaps 20, with the bearing of someone who had grown up in a house with servants, who had never known real hunger or fear until today. "Go on. The Capitoline," she said. "They haven't taken the Capitoline." It was true, the steep hill that housed the temple of Jupiter, the heart of Rome's soul, still rose unbreached above the burning city. Marcus had seen the flash of shields up there earlier, a garrison. Maybe a few hundred men, holding the high ground, if the Capitoline falls, Livia continued. There is no Rome, not even a memory of it. The Gauls will level the temples, melt the gold, and the world will forget we ever existed. Varro spat on the ground. "And what do you suggest we do?" "Lady, fly." She ignored him, keeping her eyes on Marcus. "My husband is up there. He's a senator. He has no sword arm. But he has a voice. If someone could reach him, if someone could coordinate." "Coordinate what?" Varro demanded. "We're 200 refugees on the hill." "They're thousands." Marcus held up his hand. The night wind shifted, bringing with it the stench of burning flesh. His wife had that smell on her skin after she cooked. He thought randomly, the smell of pork roasting. Now it was the smell of people. "Your husband's name?" he asked Livia. "Gaius Fabius, a distant cousin." Perhaps Rome's noble families were all tangled together like roots. "If we try to reach the Capitoline," Marcus said slowly, "we'll have to cross through the Suburra. The Gauls are thickest there. You'll die." Varro said flatly. Marcus looked at the survivors, at the baker with his scoring knife, at the carpenter with his hammer, at the old man clutching the broken blade. "Some of us will," he agreed. "But if Rome dies tonight, it won't be because we sat on a hill and watched." He turned to Livia. "Can you guide us through the back streets?" She nodded once Marcus drew his sword, a military gladius. Still sharp, still bloodied from the fighting at the gate. He looked at the blade, then at the faces watching him, then "Let's go home." The Suburra had become a furnace. Marcus led them down from the Janiculum under the cover of darkness, keeping to the shadows of collapsed insulae and burned-out workshops. The heat from the fires was so intense, it dried the sweat on their skin before it could fall. Ash drifted like snow, coating their hair, their faces, their lungs. Livia moved beside him, her eyes scanning the ruins with a focus that belied her earlier terror. She pointed left, toward a narrow alley between two tenement buildings that had somehow survived the flames. "That way, it leads to the Argiletum from there. We can reach the Forum. The Forum's a killing ground," Varro whispered from behind. "The Gauls are camped there. We'll walk right into them." "Not if we go through the Cloaca Maxima." Marcus stopped, turned. Livia met his gaze. Without flinching, "The great sewer it runs. Under the Forum, there's an entrance near the Temple of Peace, if the temple still stands. My brothers used to dare each other to go down there. When we were children, I never did. But I remember where the opening is." "You want us to crawl through sewage?" Varro said flatly. "I want us to live." A sound stopped any reply, the heavy tread of Gallic soldiers, their voices rough and loud as they kicked through debris further up the street. Marcus pressed himself against a wall, pulling Livia with him. The others melted into shadows, becoming ghosts. The Gauls passed within 20 feet. Marcus could smell them: wine, blood, wood smoke. The animal fat they rubbed into their hair. One of them carried something on a spear, at first. Marcus thought it was an animal carcass. Then he saw the ring on its finger, a Roman matron's wedding ring. He forced himself to look away, to breathe, to wait when the Gauls were gone. He turned to Livia. "Where's this sewer entrance?" She led them through the ruins for another quarter hour, navigating by memory and instinct. Twice they had to double back when they found Gallic patrols blocking their path. Once a child cried out, a boy, no more than 5, separated from his mother, and Varro silenced him with a hand over his mouth, carrying the boy against his chest like a shield against the boy's own terror. Livia stopped at what appeared to be a collapsed wall. Here, The entrance should be behind these stones. Marcus looked at the rubble. Moving it would make noise, but not moving it meant certain death at dawn. Quietly, he breathed. They worked in darkness, passing stones from hand to hand, stacking them with agonizing slowness. Each scrape of rock against rock felt like a shout. Each moment of silence stretched into eternity. Then the opening appeared, a black mouth in the earth. Exhaling the stench of Centra's, Livia stepped back. I won't lie to you, Tribune, I don't know what's down there. I don't know if it leads where I remember. I don't know if we'll come out again. Marcus looked at the hole, at the survivors, at the boy in Varro's arms, whose eyes were finally closed in exhausted sleep. We're already dead, he said. Everything after this is borrowed time. He lowered himself into the darkness. The sewer swallowed him wholly. Cloaca Maxima was Rome's bowels in every sense. Marcus stood ankle-deep in water that was not water. The tunnel curving away into absolute blackness. The ceiling pressed low above him, barely 6 feet at its highest, and the walls sweated moisture that carried the taste of rot. One by one, the others dropped down behind him, the baker, the carpenter, the old man with the broken blade, Varro, still carrying the sleeping boy, Livia, her face pale, but her jaw set. No one spoke. There was nothing to say. Marcus produced a small oilcloth from his belt, a scrap he'd saved for reasons he couldn't remember, and unwrapped a single taper. The flame, when he struck it, seemed impossibly fragile in this place of ancient darkness. Stay close, he whispered. Touch the person in front of you. If you lose contact, you're alone. They moved. The tunnel sloped downward, then leveled, then forked. Livia touched Marcus's shoulder and pointed left. He trusted her. What choice did he have? The passage narrowed until they had to turn sideways to squeeze through. The stones scraping their backs, the water rising to their knees. Something living skittered away from the light. Several somethings. The boy woke and began to cry, a thin, pitiful sound that echoed down the stone corridor like a warning bell. Varro clamped his hand over the child's mouth again. But the damage was done above them, through layers of earth and stone. They heard the muffled thunder of Gallic feet. They had been heard. Move, Marcus hissed. They stumbled forward, no longer caring about silence, caring only about speed. The tunnel branched again and again, a labyrinth designed by engineers who never imagined anyone would navigate it on foot. In darkness, with death scratching at the surface above, then the tunnel ended. Marcus held up the taper, its flame guttering low. Before them stretched a pool of black water, flat and still, reflecting nothing. The tunnel continued on the other side. He could see the opening, but between here and there lay 20 feet of unknown depth. We have to swim, Livia whispered. I can't swim. The baker said. No one answered him. Marcus handed the taper to Varro and stepped into the water. It was cold, colder than it had any right to be, and it rose past his waist, his chest, his shoulders. His feet found nothing beneath them. He kicked, pulled himself forward with arms that had already given everything, and reached the far side. One by one, they followed. The baker thrashed and swallowed water, but strong hands pulled him out. The old man with the broken blade simply sank, his eyes wide with terror. And Marcus had to dive back in and drag him up by his tunic. When they were all across, Marcus counted 211 had drowned in the darkness. He didn't have time to mourn them. Ahead, a shaft of gray light slanted down from above, a grate, clogged with debris, but open to the air. The form Marcus climbed toward it, his wet feet slipping on stone, and pressed his eye to the gap. What he saw made him want to sink back into the water and never surface. The Gauls had built their fires in the sacred way. They had butchered animals and worse on the altars of gods who had protected Rome for 700 years. They laughed as they did it. They sang songs in their guttural tongue and passed wineskins between them while Roman corpses lay unburied in the street, but beyond them, across the open space, the Capitoline Hill rose like a promise end on its slopes. Roman shields still caught the first light of dawn. The distance between the sewer grate and the Capitoline was less than 300 paces. It might as well have been 300. Miles Marcus studied the forum through the gap, counting Gauls, counting torches, counting heartbeats between patrols. The barbarians were drunk, most of them, but drunkenness didn't make their swords dull. It only made them unpredictable. We can't cross in daylight. Varro whispered from behind. We can't wait until dark by then. The Capitoline could fall, and we're dead either way. Marcus turned from the grate, in the dim light filtering down. He saw his people 211 survivors, caked in sewage and ash, hollow-eyed with exhaustion. The baker clutched his scoring knife. Carpenter gripped his hammer. The old man with the broken blade had stopped trembling. They were waiting for him to tell them what to do. He had no answer then. The boy spoke. Are we going to see the gods? Marcus looked at him, this child who had cried in the darkness, who had almost betrayed them all, who now stared up with the strange clarity that sometimes comes to the very young in the face of death. What? The gods, the boy repeated. Up on the hill, Mama said. The gods live on the hill. Are we going to see them? Livia knelt beside the child. What's your name? Lucius, Lucius? Listen to me. She pointed toward the grate, toward the light. The gods are up there. Jupiter, Mars, Vesta. They're waiting for us, but the bad men are in the way. We need to be very quiet and very brave to get past them. Can you be brave? Lucius nodded solemnly. Can everyone be brave? Livia asked, raising her voice just enough to carry through the tunnel. No one answered with words, but hands tightened on weapons. Jaws set, eyes focused. Marcus looked at Livia, at this woman who had been a senator's wife, who had never held a sword, who had lost everything and kept moving anyway. When we go up, he said quietly, stay behind me if I fall. Don't stop. Don't look back. Don't try to fight. Just run for the hill. You'll fall. Probably. She held his gaze. Then I'll run, and I'll make sure Lucius runs, and when we reach the top, I'll tell them your name. Tribune, I'll tell them what you did. Marcus almost smiled. They won't care about my name. They'll care about the Gauls at their gate. He turned back to the grate and pressed his shoulder against it. On my count, don't stop for anything. The iron groaned as he pushed. Light flooded the darkness. They erupted from the earth like the dead rising for judgment. The first Gaul never saw them. He was sprawled against a broken column, a wineskin dangling from his hand, his head lolling. Marcus cut his throat in passing a single efficient motion that barely slowed his stride. Then they were running. The forum opened around them like a nightmare. Fires crackled. Bodies lay where they had fallen. A few Gauls looked up from their plunder, confused by the sudden appearance of Romans where no Romans should be. That confusion bought seconds. Seconds became paces to the hill. Marcus roared, don't stop to the hill. Arrows began to fly from somewhere. Gallic archers on the rostra. Reacting too late, a woman behind Marcus screamed and fell. He didn't look back. He couldn't. Livia ran beside him. Lucius clutched against her chest. The boy's small arms wrapped around her neck. Her breath came in sobs, but her legs kept moving. The slope of the Capitoline rose ahead. Marcus could see the garrison, now Roman soldiers, lining the walls, staring down in disbelief at the apparition rising from the burning city. Open the gate, he screamed. In the name of Jupiter. Open the gate. More arrows. A man to his left went down, a shaft through his throat. The carpenter with the hammer stumbled, fell, and did not rise 30 paces to the base of the hill. 28 Gallic warrior stepped into their path, huge, bare-chested, his hair bleached white with lime, His sword already swinging, Marcus met him head-on, their blades crashing together in a shower of sparks. The Gaul was stronger. Marcus felt his arm go numb from the impact, but the Gaul was also drunk. Marcus ducked under the next swing and drove his gladius up into the man's gut. The Gaul stared down at him with something like surprise, then crumpled 10 paces. The gate, a temporary barricade of wood and stone, began to swing inward. Roman hands reached out, grabbing the runners, pulling them inside. Livia went through, Lucius went through, Varro went through. Dragging the old man with the broken blade, Marcus turned at the threshold behind him. A forum burned behind him. The Gauls were rallying, their war cries rising above the crackle of flames. Behind him, the city that had ruled the world lay broken and bleeding, but ahead on the Capitoline, Rome still stood. He stepped through the gate. It closed behind him with a sound like the end of the world. The men on the Capitoline stared at him like he was a ghost. Perhaps he was. He certainly felt like one hollowed out, scraped clean, walking on legs that no longer seemed connected to his body. Sewage had dried on his skin. The blood had caked on his hands. He didn't know which blood was his and which belonged to the Gaul he'd killed at the gate. You came through the sewer. An older man in a senator's toga approached, his face a mask of disbelief. You came through the sewer and crossed the forum at dawn. Marcus nodded. He couldn't find words. The senator grabbed his shoulders, gripped him like a man grasping a lifeline. What's your name? Tribune Marcus Fabricius. Fabricius. The senator turned to the crowd that had gathered: soldiers, senators, priests, the last free Romans in the world. Remember that name. Remember what he did. A woman pushed through the crowd. Livia. She had Lucius in her arms, the boy's face buried against her neck. But her eyes found Marcus immediately. You're alive. So are you. She almost smiled. We're alive on a hill, surrounded by barbarians, with no food and little water. The almost smile faded. How long can we last up here? Marcus didn't answer. He didn't know. Days. Perhaps weeks if they rationed. But the Gauls had time. They had numbers. They had the entire city as their camp. Rome would fall. Not today. Not tomorrow. But eventually, the hill would starve. The temple would burn. The gods would die with their people. Turned away from Livia and walked toward the edge of the wall. Below, the Gauls had gathered around the gate, hundreds of them, thousands, their torches pricking the twilight like stars falling to earth. They were laughing again, celebrating. Certain of victory, Marcus watched them for a long moment. Then he heard a sound behind him. A voice. Many voices. The priests had gathered at the temple of Jupiter. They were singing an old hymn, older than Rome itself, older than the Republic, the hymn of invocation, the song that called the gods to witness one by one. The survivors joined in: soldiers with broken shields, senators in torn togas, women who had lost their children, men who had lost their wives. They sang, and on the wall, looking down at the barbarians who had come to erase his city from history, Marcus Fabricius began to sing too. His voice was rough. His throat was raw. He had no idea if the gods were listening, but 200 feet below, in the forum of a dying city, a Gallic chieftain looked up at the hill and heard the sound of Romans who refused to be ghosts. And for the first time since the gates fell, he wondered if he had made a mistake.